Get started. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us this morning for our last Lower Des Plaines Watershed Group meeting for the year. We're a week later than normal with Thanksgiving holiday. So just getting started. We'll start out with approving our annual or our member meeting minutes from the September meeting. We're going to have some discussions around the NARP and our next steps for our main STEM study, and then updates on chlorides and the TLWQS and outreach materials for winter. Kind of no changes, I think, since the last meeting. Our current list of members. So again, first on the list, was there any questions or comments about the meeting minutes from last week or last meeting in September? You can just unmute yourself or throw things in the chat. I have both things open here. All right. If there are no questions, can I get a motion to approve the minutes as they were presented? And you can raise your hand.
So moved.
Okay, I got Scott. And a second.
What?
I don't have your account number, but I'll talk to Devendra, get it from him.
How come you don't?
Seconded.
Seconded. Thank you, Keith. Okay, I'll set up our poll. You can just click your answer, hit submit. Okay, meeting minutes have been approved. All right, so we discussed a little bit of this part at the last meeting, kind of going over what we're looking at as our proposed components of the NARP, really being a assembly of several different reports. So kind of the basics of watershed information and our existing data that we have. Looking at how we're utilizing the IPS model that DRCW and Lower DuPage developed as the source of our target for total phosphorus, and then the associated effluent limit implementation based on that. And that would be specifically for our tributary streams, as the IPS model was really developed for wadable streams. Analysis of dissolved oxygen criteria and kind of how dissolved oxygen is functioning in our streams. So that's a current project that we're working on in partnership with DRCW and Lower DuPage Watershed Coalition. Some work that NBI is doing, kind of really looking at some of the more current data. So when the IPS model was developed, the continuous DO data that we had was, we needed more of that data, also then associated more deeply with nutrient data. So not only just total phosphorus, but looking at components of phosphorus and other nutrients and chlorophyll A, both cystonic and benthic. And so that had been part of the expanded DO program that was launched in 2018, 2019. And so taking all the data that's been collected in these three watersheds around that and really kind of taking a deeper dive into that using some of the same statistical analysis from the IPS model. And so we have a draft report from NBI on that. So we're in the process of reviewing that right now. The non-point source component for the NARP, because that was part of the direction given from IEPA that we needed to look at sources from sources of nutrients, phosphorus from non-point source, and based on data gathered through both Minnesota and Wisconsin, and looking at where what major sources of phosphorus coming from non-point, really looking at fall leaves as being one of the largest components of phosphorus sources for non-point source. So we worked again in partnership with Lower DuPage and DRCW, looking at analysis of street sweeping and leaf collection. So there's a report done that included a lot of Lower Des Plaines communities. We're going to be working on kind of pulling that part out, having a separate report for Lower Des Plaines watershed area specifically. So that'll be a component. The trading program was included in the language. It's kind of just in a holding pattern right now. We're not sure really if a trading program will be specifically useful as we move forward, but it is an option that will remain there. We'll continue doing our bioassessment, expanded DO, chlorophyll A monitoring into the future. And then the last component is looking at how we're going to deal with the Lower Des Plaines main stem component and how we're going to determine what that target should be. Like I mentioned, the IPS model target for total phosphorus is really based on data from wadable streams. And so that's this next project that we're going to be looking at as to how to develop that target. So we discussed, this was information that was put out in our request for proposals, kind of looking at the different tasks as we go forward with developing the strategy. So reviewing existing data, really looking at kind of identifying the goals to be met as part of this large river NARP, looking at the data that we have, and we're kind of at the bottom end of this watershed. So what is going on in the upper parts of the watershed, really in two areas. We have the Des Plaines River proper upstream of us, and then the cause coming in, and looking at the various sources and inputs of phosphorus coming from those two areas. And then looking at whether or not a model is the right approach going forward with determining that. And then once we determine whether or not a model is necessary, which model might that be, and then evaluating the current data that we have and whether or not that data is sufficient to move forward with a modeling effort, or if we're going to need additional data to put into that. And then preparing the actual strategy for how we're going to move forward with that. So we had, I think at our last meeting in September, we had received proposals based on the RFP that we had put out, and we set up interviews with both Geosyntec and Tetra Tech in October. A lot of discussion in those interviews, and after the interviews with the board, we had some additional questions that we submitted to both of the consultants and reviewed those responses, and had a follow-up meeting in November with the board to select a consultant. And Tetra Tech was chosen to develop the NARP strategy. So again, this is the first step in the process of the strategy, and then we'll be implementing that strategy as part of our NARP tasks going forward. So this is the kind of the first step in this piece of it, and we'll likely be going out to, once we have that strategy and determining how we're going to implement it, will likely be another RFP process going forward. So at this point, we have a contract that we've used. Really was a lot of standard contract language that's been used in other contracts with DRCW and Lower DuPage. So making adjustments to that contract to fit our needs. The board has reviewed that contract. Tetra Tech is now reviewing it. And so really what we're looking for today is approval for the executive board to finalize the contract with Tetra Tech, not to exceed $55,000. So this is money that we've been budgeting
Not a big deal. Just
really since 2018
hey, Terry. Good morning.
through all of our budgets each year, putting money aside for NARP related projects. So that's where these funds will come from. So any questions on kind of the process or where, and when we talk about next steps in the next slide, but kind of where getting to this point, any questions that anyone has? Okay. Without questions, can I get a motion to authorize the executive board to finalize the contract with Tetra Tech not to exceed $55,000?
Adoles, I'll make that motion.
Okay, Ed. And can I get a second?
Second by Frankfurt, Zach Brown.
Thank you, Zach. I'll launch the poll. Okay, that motion is carried. Thank you. So kind of the next steps in the process. So once we have things finalized with a contract, we should be able to get that signed in the next week or so with Tetra Tech. And kind of the first task was to really review all of the data that we have so that they can kind of get it all into sort of an orderly format on their end so we can move into that second task, which is really looking at our goals and how we want to move forward with this component of the main stem NARP. And at that point is really where we'll have, I think, a kickoff meeting with the larger group. And really what I'd like to do is put together a project committee. We discussed this a little bit at the last meeting. I've reached out to a few folks, but really the important people to be involved specifically are those representatives from those plants that discharge to the main stem. So we definitely would like to have participation from those communities. So looking at like Romeoville and Crest Hill and Joliet and Shanahan and Illinois American. These are all treatment plants that discharge to the main stem. So we definitely want participation there. Anybody else who's interested in participating is more than welcome to. So having that kind of project committee that will be working directly with, kind of some of these meetings with Tetra Tech. And we'll also have Tetra Tech come in and do some presentations for the larger group when we're ready in the future. But with this committee here, we're really looking at kind of a kickoff and goal development meeting scheduled likely sometime in January. So for those of you who may be interested in participating, please feel free to send me an email. I will be reaching out to those specifically who we definitely need to have at the table because this obviously will impact those plants directly going forward, and so we don't want that participation. So I'll be working with Alex on our staff as far as we have a list of the data where it's all available from. There's a lot of data from MWRD, from our own monitoring data. There's some Illinois EPA data. So pulling all of that together, which we have most of it already there, but we'll finalize pulling that together, making it available for Tetra Tech as kind of the first step in that process. And then kind of an update for where things are at moving forward on the tributary side of things. So we did hold a meeting in October down in New Lenox with participants from our tributary plants and really got into more detail. And we've talked about the IPS model and the target that there's an in-stream benchmark that was developed through the IPS model with a range of like 0.115 to 0.2799 or something in that range. So I mean that 0.28 is an in-stream target. So we want to be below 0.28 in stream for phosphorus to not be our limiting factor for aquatic life. And so looking at how we would implement that as an effluent limit, and this is following along a lot of the discussions and kind of steps that DRCW and Lower DuPage are utilizing in the same way of kind of looking at how an effluent limit potentially in the 0.35 range would get us to that in-stream target. And so really at this point, we're kind of looking at making sure, so there's a lot of modeling that was done both in the DuPage River system, the Salt Creek system, looking at how a effluent limit would get them to that target, the in-stream target. And so just really comparing our in-stream data and our effluent, current effluent data, and how that compares with the modeling work that's been done in the DuPage system, so that, making sure we have a good level of confidence that we'd be able to apply that here in our watershed. So those are some of the things that we're kind of working on right now, what those next steps would be, and really how that effluent limit would be implemented. So still a lot to discuss with those plants in particular, and looking at comparisons of cost, both from their own feasibility studies and potentially looking at updated numbers there. So still going to be reaching out to those plants for some additional information, making sure we have updated information on costs, and also having a better understanding. I think this is something that was discussed after that meeting, of just understanding the potential need for expansion for any of these plants and how that may work into some of these discussions as well. So this is still definitely an ongoing component of discussion, and a lot of that happening more specifically with those communities. So moving on to chlorides here, as we've already had some of our first winter storms really quite early in early November. But with the time limited water quality standard for chloride, PMPs were due in November. At least that's our take on things. And the board order was fairly clear on this. I think the way that it was written into the permit, the permit reflected an effective date, which the effective date on the permit was September 29th. So 6 months from that effective date, which would put it into March. We've had some discussions internally and have been recommending communities or entities that are involved in the TLWQS to have those PMPs completed in this November framework, because it may be a conservative approach, but we feel that is what actually was reflected in the order. We have received, I think I have all but maybe 3 for our Lower Des Plaines members. And all the ones that were submitted are now posted to our website. There's the link there, but if you go to the Lower Des Plaines page within the website, and you look at the Our Work section, and you'll get to the chloride TLWQS page, and we have all of them listed there. When annual reports are due, they will be listed in the same place. We have things grouped together by community, so that or entity, so that in the future, anything that has been submitted will all be together, by entity. So those are available. We worked on a lot of these with communities. Hannah Miller on staff here at the Conservation Foundation, who's leading work with the CAUSE group, the CAUSE chloride work group. We've been working with entities to review PMPs, kind of get them answer a lot of questions, get through the process using the template that we provided. So I think overall, the PMPs look pretty good. We're putting together a table now with the information out of the PMPs as to how many of the BMPs are currently already being met and how many kind of moving forward, just so we can kind of track that overall. And for the most case, I would say the most entities are implementing at least 2/3 of the BMPs listed. The way that the permit is written, those BMPs, some of them are, specific implementation items, like that you need to implement a particular, like you need to be using pavement temperature. So you need to have pavement temperature sensors, at least a handheld sensor to be tracking pavement temperature. So that's something like you need to just have done within that first 12 months. And then there's other things that are more of, you need to have a plan in place about how you're going to outfit a sufficient number of vehicles with pavement temperature sensors within this first 5-year, time frame. So really what you need to have completed, so you can check the box on that BMP, is that you have a plan about how you're going to move forward with that. And that's where all the BMPs that, they need to be implemented within this first year. So by May of 23, so I said, some of them are, you need to actually be doing this, or you need to have a plan in place about how you're going to do it within the first 5-year time frame. Some of the other dates that are there, having all of your equipment calibrated by November 30th of each year, having that documentation in place, that you've done some sort of staff training by November 30th of each year. And there's a lot of discussion that we're continuing to have about what staff training needs to be. The first annual report is going to be due next July, based on the data and information from this current winter. So we've been working on an annual report template, which I think we're just about ready to share with people. Or may have, I don't know, Hannah was going to be getting that out. So I gotta check and see if that's actually gone out yet, but we're very close to at least having, this is all the stuff that needs to be in the annual report. We're still working on trying to make the format a little bit easier. We definitely learned some things from the format that we provided for the PMP template. And a lot of it really just gets kind of back to, you guys are really good at the work you do with, on the public works side, keeping the roads clear and safe. Word may or may not be, your friend. And so really looking at trying to make the template itself just easier to fill out. So those are some of the things that we're working on right now with the template itself. So I think we're going to get out where we're at right now, so you can really see all the information that is going to be needed to be able to fill this out by that July 1 deadline. Exactly how it looks may change as we're kind of working on some of those details, but we want to try to make this as easy as possible for your staff to fill out, and any comments that people have on both the process that we had for the PMP, as well as once you see what the template's going to look like for the annual report. We're always looking for that input, any suggestions to make things easier. So we'll have that out. And we've been holding mentoring sessions, and we are continuing to put together a list of topics. And this is really meant to, be continued on throughout the time frame of the TLWQS. And this really does help to meet one of the specific things that was identified through the board order of those communities or entities that are further along in the process, have more experience, have kind of more resources to be able to share resources to bring along those entities that may be a little bit further behind. And it is open as to whether that's sharing experience and knowledge, all the way to the extent of potentially sharing dollars. And so we're really looking at this as a way for everybody to participate in these mentoring sessions, either as someone sharing information and experience and knowledge, as well as those who, are looking for that knowledge and contacts to be able to build their programs. So participating in these mentoring sessions from either side of either being a community or entity that hosts them, that shares, their experiences, their lessons learned. I mean, those are all things that are going to help us check this box off in a way that we're sharing knowledge and helping others move forward without necessarily the group like collecting funds to fund certain entities to be able to move their program forward. So that's where the encouragement for everybody to participate in these is there. So these are, we've kind of gone through the basics of the TLWQS requirements. We had a working session on developing the pollutant minimization plans. We did in-person calibration workshops, and a big shout out to both Evanston and Orland Park for hosting those, as well as for we had both Monroe and Henderson assisting with the calibration workshops as well. One of the next ones that we'll likely be doing over the winter is on what that annual report is and what needs to go into it and how all that's going to come together. And then some of the other topics that have been brought up, we're really looking at how to use liquids, how to make brine, looking at weather, and the different systems that different communities are using, pavement temperature, and how all that relates to application rates. So these are some of the topics that we'll be working on putting together some of these mentoring sessions on in the future. We have a fluoride committee for the lower Des Plaines, and what we've kind of looked at moving forward is combining that our committee with the Chicago Area Waterways Chloride Work Group meetings. That group, that's all they're focused on is chloride. So their meetings are, other than approving previous minutes and maybe some budget items, their meetings are just focused on how we're meeting the TLWQS. So it seemed to make sense to combine our committee meetings with their quarterly meetings to have these discussions kind of all together versus us having discussions and them having discussions and then trying to come back and bring those things together. So the next meeting is December 14th. That's at 1 p.m. It's on Zoom. You'll be getting an invite for that. I think early next week, those will go out. So really anybody who's on your staff who's dealing with the chloride side of things, that's definitely the meeting that we would like to get their participation in. I believe we're going to have a couple of communities just sharing some experiences on using liquids. And then we're going to have a lot of discussion around annual training and kind of what that looks like. Because it's not the same thing for everybody in your organization. It definitely can be tailored. It can be multiple things, and looking at ways that between the two work groups, how we can maybe provide some general materials that become a part of your training. So one of the things that we will be definitely discussing at the meeting on the 14th is for next year's training to potentially have like a short video where we're maybe visiting many of our members to talk about different components of the why we're doing this, and then getting into how everybody within your program has a role to play, and whether everybody has a role to play in good housekeeping, in understanding what your snow and ice plan is, in that documentation component, and at least hitting those highlights, so there'd be a nice consistent message that then can be used by all of our members. But then also learning from others, what are other communities doing for some of their snow and ice training, looking at what is it, there's a Northeast Illinois safety and training facility that's up on the north side. There's a lot of really good resources there, so trying to pull all the various resources together to be able to have communities and entities be able to customize their own internal training. Little overview from the winter de-icing workshops that were held this past fall. So in total, we had 6 workshops, 4 roads, 2 parking lots and sidewalks. These were all put on by Connie Fortin, who's now with Bolton and Mink up in Minnesota. So these are workshops we've been holding over the last several years. We did this in conjunction with DRCW, Lower DuPage, Chicago Area Waterways, Lake County, both their Stormwater Health Department and DOT, as well as Conservation Foundation. So staff from all of these organizations worked together to coordinate and help field questions and take care of registration, things like that. So we had over 900 participants in total is our estimate. Since you were able to share the link with your employees, we asked some of the survey questions, how many people are in the room with you. So we have an estimate of at least 900 participants across the 6 workshops. In total, we ended up with a surplus of about $900. So we had a number of sponsors that contributed, and then the $50 registration fee. So then the $900 is just going to be held to go towards next year's workshops. And those may look a little bit different for next year. We will likely still continue to hold the roads workshop that's been done in the past with Connie and her staff. But through the grant that the Conservation Foundation received and a project that Hannah and I have been working on developing a Illinois-based training and certification program for parking lots and sidewalks. Those materials are nearing completion and will be ready for trainings for 2023. We're wrapping up. We have the manual is like 99% complete, waiting to get some final version of it back from the graphic design firm, and then the training slides program itself is in a draft stage, and we're going to be holding a couple of kind of test workshops in early 23 to kind of put some final touches on that. But we'll be ready to actually host those trainings next year. So that will be done in place of the workshops that Connie has put on for us in the past for parking lots and sidewalks. And then we're also between staff of these watershed groups really looking at how we might look at least doing some in-person workshops, maybe for specific, maybe things that are related more towards the public works director or supervisor level. So we're working on some ideas for that. For seasonal outreach, you can find all of our topics at the LDP Watershed's website. The bottom of every page, you can click on outreach materials. It'll take you to the outreach material page where we have things listed out by topic. So our new materials for this year for winter, really continuing to hit on the liquids and providing materials around liquids and helping people understand why using liquids is helping us, move forward, both providing safe surfaces as well as making those reductions in chloride usage. So we have a number of a couple of different blogs. We have a new blog for this season, and then we have a number of different graphics and posters related to liquids as well. We've added a new blog on looking at water softeners as a way to look at how we make reductions in chlorides reaching our streams, and then another more focus for directly for homeowners. So we have social media posts to go along with all of our blog articles. We have a new poster and some other graphics that are available, as well as the posters that we've put together in the past. These are available both as graphics, as PDFs that can be downloaded from the website. Pretty much just right click on them and download. So, sharing these with your residents, sharing these with local businesses in your community, utilizing them in your own, Facebook posts or sharing through our Facebook posts. We do have a Lower Des Plaines Facebook page that Leah posts to quite regularly with these materials. So whether you share those posts or create posts of your own materials to put in text in a newsletter, if you have other ideas of formats, we're always interested in those ideas. We want to make these as useful to you as possible. On that same page, you can also find videos that we've put together in the past, as well as like we have the video there from Romeoville that they did. If your community has put together any videos, whether it's on winter related topics or anything else that relates to the topics that we have information on, we'd love to share the work of our members. But we do have a webinar that's available that we had done that's really geared towards residents. We have a video on how to calibrate a walk behind spreader. And then there's the PSA video that we were able to borrow from Edina, Minnesota, and put some of our own information on the end of that. So those are all available through that once you get into the winter outreach section. We also at saltsmart.org, all of this material is also available, as well as the recordings from our winter technical briefs, both from 20 and 21. One of them kind of highlighting benefits of segmented blades that we did with Scott Weber. So really more on that sort of technical side of things for our public works folks. So those are also available. Kind of looking forward, I know the groundwater issue and drinking water issue is definitely on the top of lists for many communities within our watershed group. So one of the things that Leah and I have been talking about is kind of revisiting some of our previous materials. We've done a lot of stuff on rain barrels and rain gardens and native plants, which all have benefits, water conservation benefits that were not necessarily highlighted. So looking at how we might rework some of those materials to really highlight the benefits to water conservation and how that might relate to reducing your water bill, but also looking at some both indoor and outdoor tips for water conservation. So we're working on those, and I'd like to actually set up a couple of discussions with communities who might be interested in helping us really kind of narrow down on specific topics, specific messages, so that we can be assisting our members in how they're communicating around water conservation. We'll continue our green infrastructure series. So this relates kind of directly back to the MS4 requirements. So green infrastructure is something that you're supposed to have materials available for your residents on. So we started out with sort of what green infrastructure is last year, and then we've been adding on kind of specific green infrastructure practices. And so trying to follow along with the water conservation topic, looking at cisterns and rainwater collection systems. So, for not so much for the homeowner site, but for some of the maybe more commercial or business type sites. So I have information on green infrastructure there. And then still working on an ecology topic for spring. So any other topics that you guys are interested in, issues that you have with residents, messages you're trying to get out around stormwater management, water quality, those are the topics that we're focused on, and we would love input from your communication staff, your public works staff, what are the questions or concerns that you're getting from residents on these things. We'd love to know so that we can help to work on topics that are specifically useful to you guys. So like I said, we do have a Lower Des Plaines Watershed Group Facebook page. Please make sure that as an organization or individually that you've liked the page. You'll see the post that Leah puts up, and please share these through your own social media. Help us broaden our impact. all of the videos, both from our member meetings as well as those winter technical briefs. The other videos that I'd mentioned before are all available on the Will County Watershed's YouTube channel, as well as links from the website itself. Some upcoming dates. I think I may have had the annual meeting date at the bottom of the email incorrect that I sent out earlier this week. Our annual meeting is going to be on January 26th. Will remain on Thursdays. I think the date I put in there was actually a Friday. So January 26th is our annual meeting, 10 a.m. At this point, we're still looking at continuing these on Zoom because I think we're able to get a lot better participation in the meetings, just with the size of our watershed and how spread out we are. So we'll likely continue these meetings via Zoom, but then the next one being our annual meeting, we'll be re-electing or electing officers and board members. We will have a draft budget out ahead of that meeting for review, but we'll also be approving our next year's budget. And then we have our other remaining meetings. So every other month, the fourth Thursday of the month, which puts us actually, I think Thanksgiving will be later. We may actually I may have to change that December meeting. We may still be able to do it in November next year. I think we end up with a very late Thanksgiving next year. The other meeting of note, which I had mentioned, was that Chicago Area Waterways Chloride Work Group meeting, December 14th at 1 p.m. on Zoom. Everybody who's in our chloride committee or is the contact for TLWQS for your community should be on that mailing list. If you are not sure if you're on that list or not, and you would like to be able to be participating in those meetings, please just send me an email and I'll make sure that you are on that list. I believe that is all I have for the meeting. If there's any questions, comments that anybody has, anything else that you'd like to share with the group, please feel free to unmute yourself and just speak up. All right. Well, thank you for joining us, and have a great holiday season. And you'll definitely be seeing some information from me later in December on budgets and slates for next year's annual meeting. Thank you,
Thanks,
ladies.
Jennifer. Thanks for
Thank you,
leading.
Jennifer.
Merry Christmas, everybody.